Everybody, my name is Laura Smith. I am the Assistant Director of Alumni Engagement here at the WKU Alumni Association. I am primarily focused in career development, our Hilltoppers at Work program. I coordinate volunteers for all of these fun things and regional engagement as well. So I was very excited when Shelly reached out with all of her expertise and said, hey, I have a great idea for a presentation that I think would benefit both your students and your alumni. And hey, I'd love to come on the December 2nd and share. So I'm going to turn it over to Shelly Trent, let her tell you a little bit about herself and then present her information. And one really good thing that I do want to point out to everybody is that we're going to have time for active Q&A after this. So if you do have a question and you fear that it might not get answered, feel free to drop it in the chat and Shelly can pick it up, or use one of the fun little emojis and raise your hand if you've got a question. We're going to make this very casual and very conversational. So Shelly, take it away.
Well, thank you very much, Laura. As she said, my name is Shelly Trent. I graduated from Western in '87 and '95. I am an HR professional and have been since the early 90s, and also am a certified career coach. So I've worked in both areas during my career, proud WKU grad. Now, Laura, if you would, while I'm talking, I'm not going to be monitoring. If you could tell me if there's a question in the chat, because what I find is somebody might just make a comment like, that's a good idea, or I like that. And, you know, I don't want to stop what I'm doing and just, so if there's a question, if you would let me know, that'd be great.
Absolutely.
So what we're going to talk about today is how to get your resume past the applicant tracking system. Because as you probably know, when you submit a resume, sometimes it just goes into the black hole and you never hear anything. Well, that's because you haven't met a certain percentage of the criteria for the job. So I'm going to tell you some secrets about how to get around that. There we go. So this is a comment that I think is so very true. People think about, you know, they're submitting their resume and all the other people who are submitting resume are their competition, but that's not really true. Your competition is the applicant tracking system. And if you can get around that, you'll get around a lot of the other applicants as well, because they're not going to know these secrets. Some information I wanted to share with you just in general about where resumes go. On average, a job posting gets 250 applications, and of those, 4 to 6 are contacted for an interview. In my career, typically we'll do phone interviews with about 6, and then we'll narrow it down to 3 people for an in-person interview, and then we'll do a second interview with 1, and if that works, then we'll hire that person. 75% of resumes, if they're submitted through an ATS, will not be seen by human eyes. Because the ATS typically only spits out or releases a certain percentage, and it's not very many when you think about how many applications there are. About 95% of larger organizations use an ATS. A lot of smaller ones do too, and it might not be as sophisticated as the larger companies, but a lot of them do. Only the very small ones don't. Like where I work right now, it's a very small nonprofit, and we don't use an ATS. I'm the ATS. I read them all. So, and big companies get 50 to 75,000 resumes a week. So if you're applying for a really big company, that's a lot of different resumes that people are going to be sending through the ATS. Another statistic I found was about 40% total of employers use an ATS. But you won't know whether they do or not. You won't know if you're applying to a company like me where we don't have that many staff and we don't have an ATS, or if they have one. So you have to do your resume as if you are applying through an ATS. 62% of companies use some sort of applicant tracking system, and they admit that some qualified candidates are being filtered out. I know that I've applied for jobs and immediately within seconds I get a no thank you email, and it might be at midnight, and I know, well, okay, I didn't get through the ATS because they're immediately sending me something to say you didn't meet the criteria. Older applicant tracking systems use what we call OCR, ocular character recognition, which is why it's important, and as I'll get into this later, not to use a lot of symbols, different fonts, underlining, things like that, because an OCR system won't be able to read that very well. They can really just read text. And an ATS is set up to judge the applicants as to the requirements of the posting. So when you're looking at the job posting, you have to try to match that up as much as possible. So you want a different resume for every job you are applying for. And I know that sounds like a lot of work, and it is, but it's really important, because if you don't show in your resume and your cover letter how you match the job posting, it won't make it through the ATS. And the ATS only knows to match the words in the posting. So if you're using a lot of flowery language or things that are not in the posting, you're probably not going to get through. Some ATS programs are set up to just look at the first page, which is why you need to have your resume like a funnel. And I'll go over that a lot more in a little bit. They also look for misspelled words or grammar, and they're going to kick out resumes that don't meet those criteria. So again, most of the time, a person may not even see your resume unless it meets those criteria that are plugged into the ATS. And typically, the HR person just plugs in the job posting. So you have to make sure that you're matching the keywords. Now, in the job description, you will see what the keywords are. Typically, a job posting has the most important duties, and it goes to the least important duties, because many times you'll see that the thing at the bottom says other duties as assigned, which is sort of the least important. And so you want to kind of build your resume to match the order of importance of what's in their posting. That's why you can, you don't have to make a whole new resume, but you can rearrange things. You can change the order of items in your resume to match what's in the posting. And if your resume doesn't have kind of all of these words or phrases, you might not get a resume review at all. And a lot of companies set it up so that there's at least an 85% match. That's what they're looking for. So what the ATS will spit out at the end or give to the HR person will be the resumes that have an 85% match and the words in the job posting. However, I will say, and I think I have a slide on this, if you just put a list of keywords at the top, it's smart enough to know you're tricking it, or it's programmed that way. So what you'll want to do is use those keywords throughout your resume in the phrases and bullet points that you use, and not just list them at the top. A great program to use to see if you have an 85% match is called JobScan. It's not a .com, it's a .co. And again, JobScan. What it does is you can plug in your resume, just the text. It'll have 2 blocks of text boxes on the page. You cut and paste your text from your resume on one, you cut and paste the job posting words on the other side, and it will tell you what match you have. So if you don't have at least an 85% match, you'll know that you need to tweak your resume until you have that. And I mean, it's free for probably the first 5 uses, and then there's a fee, but it's not very expensive and it's worth it, I think. Another thing that I can tell you from the HR perspective is always name your resume with your name. I will tell you, I get so many resumes that are just titled resume.doc. And so if I pull them into my hard drive or my OneDrive or whatever I'm using, and I have a bunch of files called resume, I have to open them and rename them all before I can save them, because as you know, you can't resave the same name over and over. So it makes it trouble for the HR person if you don't have your name attached to your document. So do name it something like Shelly Trent Resume 2021. So it's easy for the HR person to know who sent it. And I also will say I get some with weird names like Public Relations Draft Resume, or, Marketing Resume #1. So just, rename it with your name and make it easy for the HR person. That would be very much appreciated. Keep your formatting very simple. As I said, some ATSs, if they're ocular or they're not advanced enough, they can't read things like symbols, lines, logos, pictures, shadings, tables, and boxes. And by symbols, I mean ampersand, percent, dollar sign. Sometimes they don't read those. And so you have to be very careful. You know, you can spell out percent, you can spell out dollars, things like that, if you feel like it might not be able to be read. And also don't use headers and footers. Well, you can because it will look nice, but remember that the ATS can't read them. So if what you have in your footer is just your name and address, that's fine, or your name and phone number. But the ATS won't be able to really scan what's in the footer. I would suggest not using templates because they do have a lot of boxes and lines and things. And again, sometimes the ATS programs can't read that. I would do as much text as possible. I know that makes it not so pretty, but it makes it easier for the ATS. And I would include only the sections or the headings in a resume that are pretty common, because if you've ever applied for a job online and you've had to fill in their resume boxes, you probably realize that even though you upload a resume, and sometimes it moves your resume over into the boxes that their system has. Well, sometimes you probably notice that it puts it in the wrong box. And you think, well, why would it put my education in an experience box? Well, it might be because you didn't call it education. Maybe you called it professional development or whatever, and it doesn't understand what that is. So keep in mind that whatever is common, that's probably what you should use. And I would also kind of interrupt and backtrack here, that if you are filling in an online application and you're asked to upload your resume, pay attention to what format they're asking you to do it in, whether it's PDF or docx or Word. If you can do it in a PDF, that's great because it will stay in the format you've submitted it in. If it's a docx, that's fine too. But what happens is then the resume, the wording in the resume is shifted over into their format. And usually it'll let you look at the format. Some people just leave it as it is. Go through every bit of that and make sure that the formatting in their boxes, in their resume capture system, looks correct. Because typically what will happen if there's an ATS is what the HR person sees is whatever was in those boxes, and it formats its own resume for you. So if you didn't double check what the boxes had in it, it won't spit out on the other end correctly. It will look all gobbledygook. So make sure that you take time to make sure that the bullets are right, that everything that was in your resume is actually transferred over to those boxes. That's very important.
Shelley, we do have a question
Okay.
in the chat. Is it helpful to have separate pages for your cover letter and resume? And if not, should you name your document like Laura.Smith, CL, and resume? Should you have one document or two, I think is the question.
I would say 95% of the time they ask you to put it in one document. So I would always do it in one document, cover letter on the first page and resume on the second and or third. So that's what I would do. And you can name it, letter and resume. Absolutely.
Thank you.
Good question. Okay, let's see. I already answered all those on this page. All right. This is important as well. What font you choose, because again, ATSs are picky and they can't read a serif font as well as they can a sans serif font. So if you're using Times New Roman, which is very common, or something like Cambria, Century, Georgia, those are kind of common fonts. You can see how they have the little curls or edges on the letters, and those are difficult for an ATS to read. If you've ever read a document online where it's been captured by OCR, like a newspaper article that's been captured and put in Word or something like that, you'll probably notice that it gets a lot of words wrong. And that's because usually newspapers have the little serif fonts. So you want to use something without those curly cues. And the best ones and the most common are Arial, Calibri, Gadugi, and Roboto. And those are easy and clean for a system to read. Now, I mentioned that 85% magic number. I would only apply for the jobs where you have 85% of the requirements that are in the posting. Right now, so many people are looking for jobs. it's competitive, and you really need to meet the requirements. So just because you say, well, I can do that job, you really want to meet the requirements of the position. So if it says master's degree required and you don't have a master's degree, you're probably not going to get chosen, because the ATS is going to be set up to anything that's required. You have to have it or you're not going to get through. So I would say, and I don't mean to be smarty pants, but don't waste your time working on a resume and a cover letter for a job that you don't meet the requirements for. And I mentioned, again, using job scan. You want to make sure that all of your keywords and phrases are in the job posting, or in your resume from the job posting. You also want to have a headline. People don't use objectives anymore. That went out 10 years ago. So you don't want to say, you know, what your objective is. And I will tell you, the reason HR people don't want objectives anymore is because they all said the same thing. Seeking a position where I can use my skills and talents to meet the requirements of the company. Well, that doesn't tell the reader anything about what you can do for the company. So we want a headline statement that tells us who you are. So for me, it might be HR professional and career coach. For Laura, it might be alumni engagement professional. Or for somebody in marketing, it might be marketing executive. So that should be your headline. It should be kind of what the job is that you can do. You always want to highlight how you are uniquely qualified for the role, and that would be more in your cover letter, but you need to show the reader how you are such a good match for that job and all the things in the posting. So another thing is, in your experience section, and we're going to talk about this a bit more, focus on things like promotions that you've gotten. So let's just say you work at Humana. That's a place that's close to me. And you've worked there for 10 years and you've been promoted twice to 3, had 3 different jobs. You want to be sure that when you're listing your jobs, you can begin by saying promoted to the above position after 1 year, or promoted to position after, working in an interim aspect, or whatever it is that you want to say about being promoted. But you want to focus on the fact that you were promoted, and don't make it an assumption on the reader's part. You also want to talk about the results that you've had and your direct contributions, not your responsibilities and tasks. So in the job posting, it will be responsibilities and tasks. And you do want to say that, of course, but you want to write it in a way that it's more about what you've had as a contribution. And I'll show you how to write some of those sentences. They're called accomplishment statements. People have a very hard time with them, but I'm hoping that I will share with you some great ways that you can write them. Some other important things about getting your resume past the ATS is using acronyms where the ATS might not know what that stands for. So what I always say is, if you have, let's just say you have a CPA, you don't want to just say CPA. Somewhere in there, you want to use both CPA and certified public accountant, because you're not sure which one is in the ATS. Maybe both, maybe one or the other, but you want to always use both. Let's say you're a project management professional, PMP, use both of them. Or you have an MPA, Masters of Public Administration. You want to use both. And that way you're pretty much sure that the ATS is going to recognize one or the other. And don't just put your list of keywords at the top of your resume, because they're smart enough to know that you're trying to trick it by just using a bunch of words. And I've mentioned this already, I get ahead of myself. Don't use an objective statement. We want a headline like financial analyst, sales associate, communications manager, things like that. So I'm going to take you through kind of how to, it's sort of a beginning work on how to write an accomplishment statement instead of duties. So let's just say that the job requirements in the ad say 2 years experience in marketing. And please note that years has an apostrophe, or you can say 2 years of experience, either one. But let's say the job posting says 2 years in marketing. Create mail promotions, develop brochures, research target audiences, analyze sales figures, create marketing plans, maintain database of customers, and take calls from customers and resolve issues. That's what's in the ad. So you want to be sure that you're using these words. However, you can dress it up. So your resume, let's just say your original resume says 2 years experience in retail and restaurants, typed letters to send to clients, helped with newsletter to mail to our customers, provided data entry to maintain client list, created flyers about our products, attended and took minutes of sales meetings. Well, you're probably qualified for that posting that we just looked at, but it's not telling me anything but kind of what you did, not how successful you were in doing it. So you're underselling yourself. What it could say, or should say, 2 years experience in the retail and restaurant industries resolving customer issues. Produced company newsletter on our products and services that was sent to 10,000 customers per quarter. Maintained client list of over 50,000 in database, ensured contact information was consistently updated, merged mailing lists into our database, promoted company products through creation of 4 marketing pieces a month, attended sales and marketing staff meetings, and gained knowledge of analyzing sales figures. I hope that shows you that what I always say is answer who, what, when, where, why, how much. If you can think about every line of your resume that you write, if you can think about how to answer those questions, it makes it an accomplishment statement. Which person here would you rather hire? The one who described how many, how much, how often, or typed letters to send to clients? It's a totally night and day difference. You're not lying just because you share more information than is listed, right? You want to sell yourself. Again, I mentioned they're set up to notice when words are misspelled or if there's typos or bad grammar. And even one error can mean that the ATS kicks it out. So you want to proofread, and have 2 or 3 other people proofread as well. Grammarly is a great tool. It's better than spell check, grammarly.com. And ATSs only find what they've been told to look for, and that's the list of keywords from the job description. I want to also say that some ATSs can't distinguish between different things, like front end with a dash and front end without a dash, or things like MBA, Master of Business Administration, Masters of Business Administration, and one with an apostrophe. So pay attention in the job posting which one it says. If it says MBA, you want to say MBA, but you can also spell it out just in case it's listed both ways. But again, kind of watch for what's in the job posting. Hopefully it won't have typos because that would not be good. And some companies use different titles to mean the same thing. Things like project manager versus program manager. And I'm going to tell you a way to get around that as well. And you want to use the exact same type of language and wording that's in the posting. You also want to start every line with a bullet point and an action verb. You should never put my responsibilities included, my duties included, I did this, I did that, me, my, mine, whatever. You should say, achieved this, added this, awarded this, contributed this, decreased. It all should start with a verb. It should be quick bullets and easy for the person to read and scan through, because typically an HR person just scans it within probably 4 to 5 seconds to decide if you're in the yes or no pile. And if your resume is a bunch of paragraphs, you won't get past the person. They just want to be able to scan it quickly and see what you've done and what you've contributed. Another thing is, if you are trying to be fancy and use something other than bullets, like a check mark or a star shape, that's not going to make it through the ATS either. It needs to be very simple bullets. There's also a great list of powerful action verbs at the Muse. It's another wonderful website. And you also want to be careful not to use the same action verb to start a line twice. So you don't want to say managed, led. Try to mix them up all over your page and not use the same ones. They should be, again, bullet points, easy to read, not paragraphs. And of course, no typos. And I mentioned don't use I, me, my, mine, or responsibilities included. It should just be bullet points. Now, I don't know if you follow Liz Ryan, but she's a blogger, HR and career coach. And she says these are phrases that kill resumes. And I agree. These things don't mean anything to us in HR. Results-oriented professional, cross-functional teams, more than X years of progressively responsible experience, superior or excellent communication skills, strong work ethic, exceeded expectations, proven track record, team player. Anybody can say that. You need to prove it in your resume, because again, I can say I'm wonderful to get along with and I have great communication skills, but what if I don't? You need to have some sort of proof. And I will tell you how to prove that in just a second. Another author that I read frequently, and I suggest you look up his books. I've seen him speak a lot of times. He's a great guy, Brad Karsh. And when I teach, I have his book as a textbook. And he says anyone can write that he or she is a hard worker. Those kind of statements are worthless without proof. I mentioned that, at least half, probably 75% of resumes are never read. And like I said, it's 10 seconds, but probably more like 5 seconds to impress the reader. They're going to scan the first page of your resume and decide whether they're going to keep your resume as someone they want to call for a phone interview. So the quick glance usually looks at your job titles, the companies where you've worked, the dates that you started and ended your jobs, and your education. Now, if you've been a job hopper, that's going to be a problem. A lot of the younger people they work someplace for a year or less and they get the skills they want and they move on. But for more mature HR people like me, we don't look at that as a positive. So be careful about your start and end dates. I also want to mention a couple of quotes from recruiters. The resumes that caught my attention were ones with specific measures of success, and that's those accomplishment statements. And another person said, be clear, concise, organized, and put the most important stuff at the top. And I'm going to tell you about putting your resume together like a funnel. That's coming up. Let's talk first again about a few more accomplishment statement examples to help you kind of understand how to write these if you're not good at it. And I will tell you, most people are not good at this. Most of the resumes I read are just a list of duties. So here's a duty that people might put: provided excellent customer service. Again, that doesn't tell me anything because anybody can write that. I'm not going to read the better one. I'm going to read the best one. Recognized by supervisor for tactful dealings with difficult customers. Received award for having highest customer satisfaction rating for the quarter. Now, some people say, well, I don't have any accomplishments because I haven't won awards. It doesn't mean you have to win awards. You could just say recognized by supervisor for tactful dealings with difficult customers. It tells me more than you provided excellent customer service. It tells me that you were recognized at work for doing so. Another one that people put on there, trained employees. Well, that doesn't tell me how many, what topics, any of that. So let's look at the best one. Developed customer service training program and presented it to 100 staff members over a 6-month period, resulting in a 110% increase in customer satisfaction levels. That's the kind of thing that's an accomplishment statement. It's really just answering the who, what, when, where, why, how, and how much. Used accounting software. Well, the even better version of that would be taught self and others to use QuickBooks and set up first computer-based bookkeeping system for small business with over 300 accounts. That tells me a lot more about your experience in using the software. So in each job that you're listing, you want to think about, how did you set yourself apart? How are you doing the job better than your colleagues? What did you do to make it your own? What special things impressed your boss? How did you, or why did you get promoted? What kinds of things did your boss write on your performance review that he or she was very impressed with or proud of? Did your colleagues ever recognize you in a meeting for something that you did very well? All of this is stuff that you should put on your resume, because if you don't brag on yourself, nobody will. How did you overcome problems? What were your results? How did the company benefit from your work? And, anytime that you've helped save money, save time, make work easier, make your company competitive, build relationships, any of that, those are all accomplishments, and you should talk about them on your resume. A few more, maybe if you're still in school. Excuse me. worked while attending college doesn't tell me a lot, but maintained high GPA, and maybe you want to say maintained 3.5 GPA while working 20 hours a week and being involved in campus activities and leadership roles. That tells me a lot more than worked while attending college, right? Now, back to Brad Karsh. This is a great book, and I hope that you'll pick it up if you feel so inclined. But, you know, if for those of you who are in school, if you put on your resume, because I've taught lots of courses for college students, and this is what I see all the time, you know, they put on there that they were a server at a restaurant, and they tell me all the different things that they've done, that they waited on customers, that they seated them quickly, that they, you know, the thing, but you know what? Everybody knows what a server does. So you don't have to list all of that. You want to tell me what you accomplished, how you were different, how you made it better. And I know it sounds like I'm belittling your work, and that's not the case, but you know, bank tellers, sales associates, retail workers, pretty much people know what they do. So you want to talk about how you did it better or different. So here's an example that he gave. Waitress, Olive Garden, summer 2015, awarded Employee of the Month in July for superior customer service, selected by management to cover more tables and more transactions than any other wait staff, worked 35 hours a week to finance education. There's nothing in there about what you did at the restaurant, that you waited tables, but it tells me a lot about how successful you were in the job and how you were mature and how you took responsibility. So that's what you want. You want those accomplishments. So let's talk just a minute about resumes in general. Resumes are a self-marketing tool, and the goal is to get a job interview. I always say, and this might sound kind of weird, but you are a product that you are selling for a company to buy. If you think about it, that's basically what it is. So you have to put on your sales hat and sell yourself. This is your chance to brag, talk about how great you are, talk about your successes, and get them to purchase your services, basically. So you have to make it very specific to them, to what they need, not to just use the same resume for everything and hope that it'll go through, because it probably won't. If they have an ATS, it needs to be very specific to the job you are applying for. One-page resumes are preferred for more like entry-level jobs or somebody without a whole lot of experience, probably 10 years or less. If you have over 10 years of experience or you have a lot of work experience, 2 pages are acceptable. I will tell you that in HR, sometimes I get 6 to 8 page resumes. And although I'm telling you to brag on yourself, that's a little overkill. When I get a 6-page resume, I feel like saying this person didn't take the time to really focus on what I need from him or her. They're just throwing stuff out there. This is everything I've ever done, and I hope it meets your needs. Well, that's not helping me as a reader. I want you to do the work on your end to make it what I need it to say about the job I have open. So I hope that makes sense. You don't want to put anything on there that's irrelevant to me, the reader. You don't want to waste a lot of space with stuff I don't need you to do. Let me give you an example from my own career. One of my first jobs was as a probation and parole officer. And when I decided I wanted to make the change to HR, and you think, well, how is that related? I always make the joke, HR is just a different type of law enforcement. But what I did was I did research on HR jobs. And I decided for my resume, even though my title was probation and parole officer, people reading my resume in HR didn't need to know about, you know, that I had to have weapons training or that I had to, you know, make arrests or testify in court. That didn't matter. The things they would care about that were probably in the job posting were things like ability to maintain confidential documents, you know, that I coached and counseled a lot of the probationers on how to get a job. I helped them get jobs. I helped them go back to school. I helped them, you know, work on their GED. Those are the types of things that would relate to HR work, not the other stuff. So there's no point in wasting your space when you could put precious information on your resume. Don't waste the space on stuff they don't care about. I know that it's important to you that you've done that and maybe you're proud of it, but it doesn't matter to the reader. Now, I talked about the funnel. As there was a quote about 10 slides ago, the most important information should be at the top so that when the reader is scanning, they're going to say, ooh, they're qualified right from the get-go. And then after that would be secondary information and then other information. And let me give you an example of this as well. Probably 10 years ago, I had an HR friend who asked me to take a look at his resume because he wasn't getting any interviews. He wasn't getting any response at all to his resume. So I read it. He said he wanted to go back into HR. So the way he had his resume set up was his most recent experience first. He didn't have any type of headline statement like, HR professional. He just started off with experience. The first job he had listed was soccer coach. He was working at a university as a soccer coach. And if I were the reader, I wouldn't go any further. That would stop me. I would say, how is this person in the HR manager pile? I would set it aside. So when I read the rest of his resume, he had other jobs that were related to HR manager, whatever, HR director. And he had a master's degree in HR, but it was at the very bottom. So what he should have done is put HR professional at the top, put relevant experience as his title, not just work experience, but relevant experience, listed the jobs that were related to HR and list his degree. And then at the bottom, he could have said other work experience, soccer coach. It's still there. The dates are still there. So the reader can still see what order things happened in, but the most important thing to the reader is at the top. A reminder, I know I talked about this at the beginning, but I know a lot of people joined us late, so I'm going to go through it again. Recruiters receive hundreds of resumes for job openings, and they're looking for easy ways to weed people out. So just one typo, one grammar mistake can mean your resume doesn't get through the ATS. They're not going to give you the benefit of the doubt. They're looking for ways to just weed through and read only the ones that the ATS says are a match. The best way, though, to get your resume through is to know someone on the inside through networking. The ATS is great. And if you're applying for jobs that you're finding online, it's great to have these tips about getting it past the ATS, but the best way is through knowing someone. And what I do as a career coach, if I'm working with someone directly and I have maybe that person I'm coaching wants to apply for a job at XYZ company. Well, if I have friends on LinkedIn at XYZ company, I'll contact them myself and say, I'm working with this person who's applying for a job there. I would appreciate it if you would pull his resume. And they usually do because all HR people kind of know each other. So if you can do some networking, go to some meetings of your profession, whatever it may be, make some connections. That always helps. Another thing I want to talk about is the use of social media in recruiting. This has probably been going on for about 10 years, but you might not be aware of how much this happens. Most recruiters are using LinkedIn or Indeed or some other method, but usually those are the top two, to find talent. Some jobs are never posted. You've probably heard that before, and it's true. My husband used to be a technical recruiter. He didn't post any jobs. He would get the job from whoever he was contracting with. He would search on LinkedIn and find resumes or profiles of people who were a match to what he wanted. He would call them, cold call. Are you interested in being considered for this job? Never got posted. So if your LinkedIn page isn't really good and doesn't look like your resume and have even more information than your resume, you're in trouble. Because when I am looking at candidates, once I pick the final 6 or so that I'm going to call, I look at their LinkedIn pages. If they don't have a LinkedIn page, or if it's really scant and there's only a couple things on there, I'm not going to interview them because they don't appreciate their own talents enough to showcase it on LinkedIn. And to me, that says they're not computer savvy. They're not on social media. They don't network for themselves. And, you know, you might say, well, why is networking important? Well, it's very important to people who are professionals, because if I were to hire you and you don't know how to do something, I would love it if you would have 2 or 3 people who do that job. You could call them, or you could post something on LinkedIn. You know, can 2 or 3 of you tell me about creating an employee handbook, or whatever it is your task is? If you don't have connections in the field, you're going to have a hard time being successful in your job. It's not my job as your boss to tell you how to do everything. So you have to have those connections. So if you're not working on your LinkedIn and you're not working on your networking, it's going to be harder for you to get a job. So as I was saying, LinkedIn and Indeed, but mostly LinkedIn, are a great way for recruiters to find talent. They pay a fee to be able to search LinkedIn in a certain way. And 73% of recruiters have hired someone who was introduced or discovered through social media. Usually what I do is, once I post a job, while I'm waiting for people to apply for the job, usually a month or 3 weeks, something like that, I'll go on LinkedIn and I'll find as many people as I can who are a good fit for the job I just posted. And I'll ask them, if you're interested in applying, here's the link, because I want to be able to find people on LinkedIn who would meet my criteria. So if you're not, you know, spending a lot of time on LinkedIn, you really should be. So I talked about accomplishments and how to prove things. So I want to go over that for a few minutes. We talked about how to write an accomplishment statement, but these are things that employers want to see proof of on your resume. They want to see that you have skills in leadership, communication, organization, problem solving, teamwork, creativity, and technical skills. Now, you can say, you know, I can say I'm creative, but what does that really mean? Well, you can tell a story on your resume about how, not in a paragraph, but in bullet forms or format, about how you solved the problem due to your creativity. You can tell, you know, what that problem was and how it was solved. You can talk about your communication skills, you know, maybe how many presentations you have to deliver a month at work, or presentations that you deliver in staff meetings, or times that you've spoken at conferences. Those are ways to prove that you have these skills, rather than just saying, I have leadership skills, you know. You can talk about times that you've been a leader on a team project at work or at school. So here's another thing I will tell you about. I know we need time to do Q&A. I'm trying to talk a little bit fast here. If the posting says they require 10 years of experience in accounting, but your resume says you have 5 in accounting and 5 in bookkeeping, the ATS is not smart enough to know that that's the same thing, basically. So you're going to have to use different words for your job titles to make it understand that you really do have 5 years of, or I'm sorry, 10 years of accounting experience. So it's really important to use the words from the posting, as I mentioned. You only have to use them a few times, 2 or 3 times. It'll understand that you have that skill. But if you use the exact same word for every job, and I see this, maybe somebody's had 3 jobs in a row that were very similar, and they just use the same bullet points over and over. That's not going to do you any good. It's going to make the ATS think you're giving it a list of keywords, right? So you want to use different sentences that can mean the same thing. You want to also tweak your job titles if necessary. So here's an example. If the posting says you need 12 years of experience as a consultant, but your job titles have been advisor, counselor, specialist, something like that, you can change your job titles. You're not lying, because you're going to use 2 titles, advisor and consultant, specialist and consultant, something like that. Or you can use consultant in your job, your list of accomplishments. So acted as consultant, something like that. But you need to use those words, or it won't understand that you have the number of years required. Also, if you're not familiar with chronological versus functional resumes, a chronological means it's in date order from the present day back to later, you know, back to 10 years ago or whatever. You need to say for every job what title you had, what the organization's name was, the city, and the state. If it's not clear what type of industry it is, then you should name it somehow. Like if it was at, trying to think of a company, Dana Corp. I think that's in Bowling Green. And I don't remember, I think they make brake parts, but it's been a long time since I was in Bowling Green. But you might want to say, manufacturer of brake parts in parentheses. And again, you don't want to use abbreviations anywhere in your resume unless you also spell it out. So if you have one employer and you've had 3 jobs, you only need to list that employer one time, and then you can list the jobs under that and say that you were promoted. You also want to list your responsibilities in order of each item's value to your future employer. As I mentioned, pay attention to the order of skills and duties listed in the job posting and rearrange your resume according to that. You can also talk about your transferable skills. Excuse me. Those are things that are transferable to any employer, like technical skills or proofreading skills or communication skills. All of those are transferable skills. They can be used by anybody at any job. Now, this is important. People are no longer putting their home address on resumes. Just list your city, like Lexington, Kentucky area, Bowling Green, Kentucky area, Louisville, Kentucky area. You don't need to list your home address, because nowadays I can pull up your address on Google. I can look at your house. I can look at the car in the driveway. And it's nobody's business. And to me, it's a little scary that somebody could look and see where I live. What if they decide that they don't live that you don't live in the neighborhood they like? Or, maybe they don't like the way your house looks. They think it's a mansion and they think we can't afford this person because they live in a mansion. So don't list your address. All you need to say is the approximate area of where you work, where you live. You do want to list your telephone number where you can be reached during the day, but never list your work number on your resume. You do not want to be looking for a job during the workday. You do not want to use your work computer to do your resume. I actually had to fire somebody for that. They were doing job interviews and doing their resume and stuff on work time. You don't want to do that. Also, make sure that on your phone, you have a professional sounding message. I have a friend who is an HR director. His son, who was a teenager at the time, was looking for work. And his voicemail was like, hey, yo, you know what to do. And so he didn't get any interviews until he changed it to, this is Shelly Trent. Please leave a message after the tone and I'll return your call. So have a professional message. If you have an email address that's not professional, change it. It's easy to get them. They're free. But you don't want anything like tattoo man, dog lover, I play guitar, WWF fan, whatever it is. You don't want that on your resume. I have seen some crazy ones. And if I see that, I don't even look any further if they have a resume or a email address like that. A lot of people have issues with inconsistent capitalization. And I know this is not about the ATS, but it could be, because it could be seen as an error. So if you are stating the exact name of a degree or a course, unless you are, it should not be capitalized. For example, so you're saying that actual title of your degree, I hold a Bachelor of Science degree in business. That's correct. I took classes in accounting, business, and communications. Those are just general names of groups of classes. I work in human resources and training. His title is Chief Financial Officer. So you don't want to capitalize words that are not proper nouns. You also want to omit anything that would give anyone a reason to discriminate against you. So you don't want to have anything on there about your race, your religious preferences, your political affiliations, unless it's a required. For instance, if you're trying to get a job in politics, then you obviously would want to list things you've done that were political. But you don't want to put, what church you attend on your resume. That's nobody's business. And if the person who is reading it has a bias against that, you would have trouble there. You only want to put stuff that's relevant to the objective of getting that job, omits anything related to age, sex, marital status, national origin, health, names of your references, hobbies, or photos. Now, some people say, well, putting hobbies on there shows I'm a well-rounded person. Well, what if they don't like your hobbies? What if you're a skydiver? What are they going to think? The HR person's going to think, oh, they're going to cost me a ton in healthcare. So don't put that on there. You also don't want to say, maybe you're like me and you're over 40. I'm way over 40, but over 40 is a protected class under the law. So if you have every job you've ever done listed on there, and you have dates of employment, and you have the dates that you graduated from school, they're going to know how old you are by deduction. So don't do that. If you are over 40, you don't need to put your dates of when you graduated from school, because they'll know how old you are. You only have to go back 10 or 15 years in duties on or in jobs on your resume. I don't go back all the way, because again, that would show how old I am. So if you're over 40, you don't have to go all the way back to your first job. You don't need to use the word resume at the top. It's obvious by what it is. Again, no photos, no logos, no personal information. Don't list your reasons for leaving a job. Don't list your salary history in the resume. They might ask you in the application, but you shouldn't put it on the resume. And you don't want to list your references on your resume. That's a separate time during the interview. If they ask you for that, you don't have to give it to them up front. You don't want to use a lot of font faces or type styles or underlines and things like that, and no political affiliations or churches. Okay, this is my contact information, Shelly Trent at live.com. And now we have about 7 or 8 minutes for questions. I am going to stop my screen share so I can see everyone. I'm going to give you a second to write down my email address in case you need it. Okay, now I can see everyone. Laura.
Hey, while we're kind of doing some housekeeping, someone asked if you have any advice for people who were previously self-employed as far as resume tips.
Well, I'm working with a woman right now who has been self-employed. List that just like you would any other job. You know, the dates, you can put the name of your own organization, or you can just put self-employed, but you would list that just like you would any other job. List what you've done in the job, your successes, all of that. Anybody who has questions can unmute themselves too. I'm not too scary.
So you do recommend not including a photo?
Yes, you don't put it on your resume. You do want a photo on your LinkedIn page, but you want to make sure it's a professional photo, not one that you just took of yourself in the car. I see a lot of, I can do a whole other program on LinkedIn, Laura, but that's one of the things I recommend, is that you do have a photo on your LinkedIn, but that it's not just a selfie. I see a golden kitty, Ruth. I have one of those myself. Mine's named Scooter.
He is really fond of Zoom and really enjoys seeing everyone. So he always wants to be a little part of the scene.
And I don't know if everyone is kind of monitoring the chat, but Ruth did share that there is a Grammarly extension that you can put in your browser that will check everything you do on the web. So that's a great thing to know as well.
I see another comment about STAR. Now, I do a program on interviewing, and I suggest that STAR is something you do in the interview, that you talk about, because most of those are behavioral questions, and they'll say, tell me about a time when, and that's when you use STAR. You want to tell them about the situation, the task, the action, and result in an interview. That's not so much for a resume, but
I appreciate that, because I think that I've been using that interchangeably, and it's honestly crippling me. Like, I can't, that's so much information to put in a resume.
Yeah,
and
it is.
and one of my later questions is, you know, if it's been a few years since you've done that job and you know that it's applicable to the role, but maybe you don't have all those details, like what would you make a point to put on that statement on your resume? So that was my next question. Thank you.
Well, and you also posted about omitting dates. Now, you don't want to omit the dates that you were employed. That's still in there. You just didn't omit dates that you graduated. Like for me, I don't care to say I graduated college in 87. So anybody who can do the math will know how old I am. So I don't put that, but I do put dates of employment, but I only go back about 15 years.
I had also heard a rule, and seasoned veterans of the workforce, but I'd also heard a rule too that each page was generally it's acceptable to give them 10 years per page. Is that true?
Yeah,
Okay.
Close. Yeah. I always say 10 years or less of experience should be 1 page. If you have more than 10, it can be 2. Yeah. The other thing I would say about the second page is you want to fill up the second page. If it's only like a quarter of a page, just, figure out a way to get it on one. Either use both whole pages or just use one.
So I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Jamie. Go ahead.
General question. I am trying to break into the tech field coming from basically a construction background. And while there's a lot of applicable things in my resume, there's no actual jobs that really apply to like web development, which is what I'm focused on. Do you have any advice for those of us that are just looking to completely change our career path?
Well, I don't know if it helped you when I talked about the probation job, focusing on anything that you did in that job, even though you might have been construction manager, anything you did that was tech related, that's what you should put at the top of your what you've done. Did you, like in construction, did you ever do anything with CAD and CAM or, anything that was technical?
No, this is real general stuff. So I do have, some experience with that I've done on my own, but it was never part of a job. I actually have a lot of stuff like that. Is that something I could include on my resume?
That you've done on your own? Absolutely. Any
Okay.
self-employment, any side gig, any, even if it's volunteer, like I volunteer in a lot of organizations, and, maybe, and I'm just going to use my own field for an example. Maybe you're an HR student, but you don't have a lot of HR experience. You can volunteer for a nonprofit that doesn't have an HR person and say, I'll work for you 10 hours a week doing your HR role, or, even, half a day on Saturday. That can be experience. Internships should be listed as experience. Anything that you do that helps you prepare yourself to be a better employee, that can be on your resume. Absolutely. And Jamie, what I would do is what I talked about with a soccer coach, put, relevant experience at the top and then other experience. And even though it won't be in date order, you'll still show the dates of employment, but you'll talk at the beginning in the top of the funnel about the work that you've done in tech.
Okay. And as a general header, because, typically you have it laid out where the header would be like the job and then your listings underneath there, you would do just relevant experience and then just go straight into it, or instead of a job, put on my own or personal projects, or is there a way that you would organize that?
Well, first, if you have a degree or you're working on a degree in the tech field, I would put that at the top.
Okay.
And then you can say relevant experience, self-employed.
Gotcha.
I would say self-employed, even if you're not working for money, because it still is, you could be getting something for it. For instance, if it's not really like a paid gig, but you're getting, maybe you're working for a nonprofit and they're going to give you something for free in repayment for what you're doing for them. I mean, you can call it self-employed. That's fine.
Gotcha. Okay.
They're
Awesome.
not going to ask you. They're not going to ask you how much you made from self-employment.
It is something I fear when I put that on there. I'm like, oh, I'm not actually doing this for money. So I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Now they might ask you in the application, your starting and ending salary. So that might be a little tricky, but in the interview, they're not going to ask you how much you made.
Okay. Awesome.
I think Miranda has a question.
I've been told many times by my tech friends, having a GitHub is a resume of sorts for tech companies. Yeah, that would be good. It's sort of like a portfolio, an online portfolio. That's excellent. Thank you, Miranda. Yeah, my brother-in-law works in an architecture firm and he has an online portfolio, which I think is excellent. Anybody else?
I got a quick question on that piggyback there. So links to portfolios, they're asking for that portfolio information. Are you putting that in on your first page, top of funnel? Or is this something that you put in an email when you're sending it along? Or where's the best place to put those links for the portfolios and whatever else you may need to provide them?
I didn't mention this, but it's always a good idea to put a link to your LinkedIn page at the top of your resume with your name and your phone number and all that. If you have an online portfolio, you can certainly put a link to that at the top. Right now, I'm working on coaching a CEO who's looking for a job, and he has made a video introduction of himself that's maybe 3 minutes long. We're going to put a link to that on his resume and on his LinkedIn. You can put on your LinkedIn page an attachment to your resume, a lot of stuff on LinkedIn that you can, I have a link to myself speaking on my LinkedIn page. So yes, put all of that stuff out there.
So
That's
do you
good.
think, and forgive me, I ask questions.
You're
Do you
good.
think that it's more cohesive, better to have one link just to the LinkedIn page that gives you all that information, the video, the portfolio, maybe you have a blog, whatever. Or if you want to target, okay, here's the LinkedIn profile, but like for myself, I have a creative background. I have a creative portfolio that is not on LinkedIn, but I have the link there. Do I go ahead and put those both front and center?
I would, because you don't have any guarantee that they're going to look at your LinkedIn page. I look at all of them, but I'm sure there are HR people who don't look at them. But I would put links to each thing on your resume, just in case they don't go there.
Thank you. At least I've got that right. Thanks.
Make it easy for the HR person.
And I think that's a great way. That's a great kind of mantra, is make it easy for the HR person. It may be a little bit more difficult for you on your end as an applicant, but making it easy for that HR person to see that you stand out and that you are only including relevant information for what they're seeking. I'm going to do one last call because we're a couple of minutes over. Are there any more questions?
I have a really good one, I promise.
Okay.
I'm so sorry, everybody. You were talking about networking being especially important. And on a lot of these places, of course, we do not have an insider, but maybe it's a job that we know we are well suited for. Once upon a time, you used to be able to call a company, ask who the HR person was so you could get the name, so you could direct the cover letter, et cetera. Do you have any advisement on how to create that network when you don't have it?
Well, about finding out the name, you can find that on LinkedIn now. I mean, if you want to work at XYZ, you can put XYZ company and it'll usually list all the people who work there and have their LinkedIn profiles. Here's what I do. If you are on LinkedIn and you look up that person and it says you're a second connection, find out who your shared connection is. So for instance, if I'm the shared connection, I'm connected to you and I'm connected to that HR person. You contact me and say, can you give me an introduction to this person? That's the best way to do it.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
And that's a great segue into what I wanted to say. I don't know if you all are if you follow WKU on LinkedIn, but there are over, I think, 70,000 Hilltoppers that follow WKU. We do have a WKU Alumni Association group on LinkedIn. And anytime you see, when you're scrolling LinkedIn or you're doing a search, remember that little red cupola that shows up is an automatic connection. And so we invite you to become a part of our group. Feel free, folks are there for a reason. They're there to network and to share experiences. So feel free to join that group and become a part and get active. It's a real easy way to make some of those connections. And additionally, following the WKU in general, their page, our university page.
Laura, we lost your sound. We lost your sound. I hear you again now. You said follow the WKU and then we lost
Follow
you.
the WKU page and then also join that group. And those are instantaneous connections for Hilltoppers. You do have that WKU experience in common. And you may find that you have a network that you really didn't even know about when you start looking back and doing the research. I think you will find that is something that is very important. And the other thing is I want to share with everyone is that, Shelly, we want to thank you. This has been amazing. It's so nice to have that interactive piece. And this, if you want to share this out, we will house this on our website, and we will let you know when that is actually published. And we also host some webinars through some Hilltoppers at Work webinars consistently. So if you'll watch our event page at alumni.wku.edu for events, we do have webinars that are both employment and career oriented, as well as some that are just fun and hobby oriented and that kind of thing as well. But thank you all so much for coming on. I will drop my information in the chat. If you would like to reach out to me, and definitely want to know when this is posted and readily available, and feel free to share it out with your friends as well and colleagues.
Laura, can I ask a quick question? I wish I would have thought of this while everybody was still on. When I worked at IU, one of the things we did in career services was we worked with the Alumni Center, and like if somebody wanted to do an informational interview, maybe like Jamie, he's going from one career to another and he wants to meet with somebody in tech who was an alumni. Do you all do that kind of match so that he could meet with someone who's in the field and ask advice specific to the field?
We would at this point refer them to ACDC, which is Academic and Career Advising on campus, but we are working on rolling out a program. Probably we're going to do a soft launch early winter and then fully launch it by late spring, early summer, where we are hoping to have individuals in some of our key market segments and key geographic segments that would be available for quick conversations or information, about a certain geographic area or a certain career sector. So we are working on that, and that should be available in the next 4 to 6 months for rollout. So be watching for that.
Awesome. Thank you for that information. I appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Somebody asked you for the alumni web. Is it wku.alumni.edu? Is that what you said?
There you go, alumni.wku.edu. So if you've enjoyed this and learned a lot, that's great. If you have further questions, I'm sure Shelly dropped her contact information. I've dropped my contact information. Please feel free to reach out. Good luck with your job searches, career changes, all that fun stuff. Thank you all so much, and go Tops.
Bye, everybody. Happy
Thank
holidays.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Happy holidays. Be safe.
Laura, do you want me to stay on?